What's up, guys? I'm Dimebot, and this is Battlechasers Nightwar, a little JRPG, Western-style JRPG from Airship. So, let's have a look at the settings menu real quick, and then we'll jump into the game. Full resolutions, you can set your screen area. Graphics, this is it. I wish there was a way to scale this game more. The art style makes it so it's not a huge issue, but it would be nice to be able to change this stuff around. Audio, you've got your sliders. Fine with that. Language, this game has a surprising amount of language options, and even more for audio. So some impressive localization there. And lastly, subtitles and tutorials. So not a ton going on in the options menu. By and large, it's fine. I just kind of wish that the graphics had a little more in the way of tweaking that you could do. So let's hop in and we'll talk about this game. There is a lot to unpack here, so it's going to be an interesting ride. Now, I am playing this with a controller. You can play it with a mouse and keyboard just fine. Alright, we're in town right now. This is Harm's Way, and this is where all your vendors are. You have your smithy. You have the Enchantress, you have this little guy up here who will sell you different artifacts for shards. And, excuse me, you can sell artifacts to him and get things. There we go. Blah, say it right time. And the curio shop. And the curio shop actually has a crafting station in it. And this game actually has a very interesting crafting system, so let's go ahead and talk about that. If I don't have all of an item, I can add more and up my chances to actually create the item anyways. And this works with potion crafting, with weapon crafting, with armor crafting. It's a fairly interesting system. The blacksmith, of course, will let us forge different gear. Most of the stuff I don't need to craft because I have better stuff already. And then we have the inn where we can rest and do various things. Now, sometimes you can take a quest here. Yep. More spiders. No? Now here's where we can choose our party members. There's one party member I have not unlocked yet. I've put about 7 hours into the game, but I have 4 out of the 5, and we're going to take Calibretto instead, because I haven't really mastered the wizard, so I'm gonna take the easy way on that so I can show you guys the combat system, which is actually a highlight of the game. Now, it's kind of nice that we've gotten this quest because I want to try and avoid spoilers. Yeah. So we probably won't go into any of the main dungeons other than to kind of look at them real quick and talk about them, but this will let me show off combat in a nice little side quest. And as with any RPG, you are going to spend a lot of time in combat, so it's fortunate that this game then has very good combat. Lots of stacking effects, and you also notice these icons down here. Each one of my party members has a skill, and this is a dungeon skill that can be used while we're in a dungeon. So, for example, Gully here can ground smash and stun all enemies. She can break walls with it, and she can use Stone Skin to become immune to dungeon damage. Garrison has a dash move and a flash bomb, and Calibretto has a heal. Now, these have a limited amount of uses per dungeon. You're shiny. Let's read the journal. There's lots of little things scattered throughout dungeons like that, and if you collect all of the various lore bits, you'll usually get a reward of some type, which I will go over in just a few minutes. Alright, now, this game uses an active battle system, so you should be familiar with it if you played any RPGs in the past. You'll see the order we're going to move in over there on the left. Now, some moves are quicker than others, some take a while to cast, and some are instant. For example, this jab right here is instant. Now, where this game gets interesting is its reliance on two things, overcharge and status effects. So, we're going to hit this slime with Sting. And now it's bleeding, and you notice that down there, Garrison has gained plus 20 overcharge. Now, this is temporary mana. It's always used first, so even if you run out of regular mana during a fight, you can generate overcharge like that, and still be able to cast your abilities. Now, that has also sundered that enemy, meaning that he will take more damage. Now, another thing that I can do is hit him and actually up my guard with Gully, and I can also use Siphon, which will let me restore 58 health for each enemy that is bleeding and do damage, so that's based on the bleed effect. Or if I want to, I can use Rupture, so I can deal 38 damage, and if the target's sundered or poisoned, it also adds a bleed, dealing 134 damage over 5 turns, stacks 3 times. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And this is a really interesting ability, and coupled with Gully. Nature's Boon. For the next 3 turns, anytime an ally receives damage, they're healed for 7 health. Now, my weapons also have a burning effect, and there we go. Lots of abilities in this game proc based on interactions with other abilities, making your team composition not only important, but making the strategy and how you use that team composition important, particularly in the harder fights. This game is a little easy for the first few hours, but make no mistake, it gets pretty damn hard. And if you don't pay attention to your abilities and how you're using them and how you're stacking buffs, you're going to die horribly, because the AI can also use all of these same effects against you. Here we go with another fight. So, let's show off one way that this game gets kind of interesting. So, I'm going to use Nature's Boon, and then I'm going to have Gully taunt. So all of her defense has gone up. She's gained an overcharge. I'm going to make this guy bleed. Now what's going to happen is when this slime attacks Gully, she's basically going to heal. Not much, considering how much he just did with that one attack, but a decent amount. Now, I'm going to use Barrier Swing here. It is also actually worth noting that Gully is the tank. They've kind of subverted the normal trope of having a giant robot be the tank, and the little girl is actually the tank, and the giant robot is the healer. Now, they have added a nice, convenient little feature where you can look at all of the status effects that are on enemies and your allies by just pressing down the left trigger and scrolling through them. It's nice if you need to know what the little icons are, although you learn them pretty quick. And we haven't even talked about bursts. These build up as you take damage, do damage, or heal, and they're special attacks. You gain them as you level up. For example, I have 2 each for Gully and Garrison. I believe Calibretto only has 1 because it unlocks at level 10. Now this slime is coming to us. You can see enemies on the overworld map, which I like. And this will be a little trickier fight. I'm going to have her taunt. And we'll use Nature's Boon. And we're going to bleed this first slime. Plus burning. I'm spending so much time on this combat system because there are so many possibilities. I'm a sucker for this kind of thing, and it plays beautifully. The animations are also nice and punchy. The way, especially that Gully attacks or that Calibretto punches people, are just fantastic. I definitely need to get a damage shield on her. Let's go ahead and use Cleave. Yeah, just the wind up, the sound effects, just very visceral. And the music in the game is pretty darn good too, although this is not one of my favorite tracks. But just that jump and that attack. Animations are fantastic. The graphic style, well, it's not the best looking game in the world. It's distinctive enough that I feel like it gets the job done, and definitely not a bad looking game by any means. The other character in our party right now, Nolan, is a mage, and his abilities are pretty different. He has his own separate status effect he applies called Arcane Sickness, and it can be triggered with, we used to trigger a bunch of other effects too. That's taking care of that. Double kill, we got some bonus XP. They've added a little finish button there that you can use to just skip the typical counting up of all the XP. Let's heal real quick using Calibretto. So there's going to be a switch somewhere that opens this door. Now the dungeons are randomly generated. This seems to have been handcrafted because it's exactly the same as it was the first time I came down here, which was a quest that involved killing a bunch of giant spiders. What's that smell? This is going to be a boss. Or at least a giant version of what we've been fighting. Or maybe just a whole crapload of slimes. It's a giant poo monster. This will be a good opportunity to really work on the combat system. Sludge Mound. Stinking Cloud reduces healing received by 50%. So this guy has his own effect that we can't get rid of. Alright. And he's got a crap ton of health. This is going to be interesting, and I may well die. So we're going to go ahead and get bleed on this guy right away. And then there's another effect that we can use from Calibretto. Oh, we're not ready for this fight at all. He's level 12. This is going to end poorly. But nice illustration of exactly how hard this game can be. So we're going to apply Gaia's Grasp here. Oh, he's about to die again. Which, when we attack this guy now, will heal. I need to get her healed up. Probably going to get knocked right back out. Go ahead and purify here. Dispel all status effects and get some healing. Not enough healing, though. Now, I'm sure it is actually possible for me to beat this guy if I play it right, but with him being 3 levels higher than me, kind of doubt it's going to happen. Well, that fight ended about as poorly as you might have expected it to. So let's go ahead and take a look at the overworld here. Actually, I kind of want to go this way. Now, the map is very different and has a very different art style. It also has one of my... least favorite things about this game. This is the giant overworld map. It's a pretty big game. There is nothing on it to indicate where you are. Now, you can fight these lesser enemies if you want, or you can just continue to walk by them. There are lots of places on this map to go, lots of things to see. You can gather crafting materials and things from nodes. This is actually one of the dungeons, and we're going to have to fight this guy. This should actually be pretty easy. Go ahead and take him down here. And now we've got some better music as well. Oh. Now, with some of these enemies out here in the overworld, or when you're higher level than them, you can just get away with just hammering on the attack button. And that was a pretty big concern of mine until I started getting to actual harder enemies and some of the other dungeons where you actually have to think, especially as I showed with that other slime boss. You really just have to think about what you're doing. However, there are some caveats to that. You can only skip enemies that you're significantly higher level than, and sometimes the fights just drag on. You'll be doing a ton of little trash fights as you try to get somewhere, and this is compounded by the fact that when you rest at the end, all of the monsters on the overworld map respawn. So I actually find myself not wanting to go and rest just because of that. It is perhaps a minor gripe if you're really into this kind of game, but if you don't like grinding, it can be a major one. So it'd be nice if they would do something to maybe address that, but I don't really mind the grind, so it's not as big a concern for me, but you definitely need to be aware that it exists. One other thing that does aggravate me about this game is the crafting benches, aside from that one I showed you in town, are only available in dungeons as far as I can tell. Now, you can upgrade the vendors, so maybe once you upgrade them to level 3, you can start using the crafting benches, but now, if I want to craft something, I need to be in a dungeon, and that's kind of annoying. Plus, upgrading the vendors actually gets quite expensive. You may have noticed that I can see the health and what some enemies are casting, and not for some. That's actually part of a bestiary book that I'll show you guys in just a minute, because we're going to go diving into the menus for just a second. Let's go ahead and use Boulder Toss, our level 2 burst. Fantastic animation on that. And the bleed ought to actually finish him off. Well, the jab definitely will. Alright, let's talk about the menus here, because there's a lot to see and do in the menus. Alright, first off, of course, you have equipment. Everybody's going to know how that works. Then you have perks. This is character customization, basically. So, I have chosen to make Gully a little more of a attack tank than a defense tank, but I can respec this on the fly if I want to. She has an increased crit chance, increases her haste, increases attack power. This is going to up her haste even more. I've chosen to make Garrison an attacking character. You can just have him start even stronger with crit damage over here. And actually this powers up. I'm going to use this actually. I could make his Warblade one of his moves stronger. I like that. Calibretto I have turned into very much a strong healer. This is going to allow you to customize your character a little bit, tailor them to how you want to play. I like its inclusion. It's a very neat system. Here's your dungeon skills. Here's your combat abilities. This is simply going to tell you what they all do, and a little short biography. Now, this is all of our gear. There's a crap ton of collectible items in this game. Weapons. And this actually shows you what you need to craft each item in the crafting index. Here's our journal that keeps track of our objectives. And this is the bestiary. This is interesting. This contains information on every monster in the game, every enemy, and you get this information by fighting them. And as you beat them and complete these little challenges, you get perks. So if I kill 100 of those bats, or 100 enemies from the Path of Fangs, rather, I get an increased crit chance by 1% for all my heroes. This very much reminds me of badass ranks in Borderlands, and it's a neat system to have in here. As you can see, there are quite a lot of enemies. This is our lore page, and these are a couple of pieces of lore that I haven't collected, but these give you rewards. You can see for finishing the History of the Iron Outpost, I got a revival flask. Oops. So there is an incentive to actually find all the lore. There's a dungeon codex, You notice that it says times entered and times completed. That is because... Oh, and this game also has a fishing minigame. It's because when you enter a dungeon, you get to choose normal or heroic, and then once you beat it, you can choose to go back and fight it on legendary. And this seems like a bad idea. The dungeons are slightly randomized. This is an exploration area. Okay. Exploration areas are kind of just areas you can walk around in and explore and gather materials and fight monsters. So you can go back to the dungeons, do them multiple times. They'll have different enemies. They'll have different little bits of lore I've discovered. And they'll have better loot that you get at the end of the dungeon from your giant treasure chest, depending on the difficulty you beat it on. So it's very much a system that encourages you to keep playing the dungeons. Some people may like it, some people may not. Whatever this is, it's not working. That's a weird, interesting effect. I like that. Very pretty snowy area. So there's a lot going on under the hood in this game. Now, didn't mean to pull that. I've already talked a little bit about some of my nitpicks, but let's get into those a little bit more. I've talked about how I don't like that the crafting is only available in dungeons and some of the grindiness of the fights, but the story so far is not anything to write home about. You come to this island, you're shot down, you're trying to find your friends and figure out what's going on. It's not bad per se. It's not mind-blowing, though. You aren't going to just be absolutely blown away by the storytelling. The voice acting is pretty good for the most part. Can't complain about that. But there are a lot of story beats that it feels like should have voice acting, and they just have those still shot scenes like you just saw with the characters talking to each other in speech bubbles. It's a perfectly acceptable way of doing things. It just is a little weird considering that there is full voice acting in certain parts of the game. Enemy variety so far, while good, has not really been too mind-blowing. You're going to be fighting a lot of bandits, a lot of the werewolf guys. Okay, we've got ourselves a good little fight here. Let's go ahead and taunt and Nature's Boon. And we're going to start bleeding these guys. 3v3 fights are where the game really comes into its own, I feel like. So obviously, I'm forcing all of them to attack Gully. The next thing we're going to do is do a guard punch because it's going to reduce the damage she takes for the next 3 turns. This is going to generate more overcharge. This is kind of what you want to do, is be applying effects. Now what I can do next turn with Garrison here is actually do a pretty big amount of damage because I'm going to consume all this overcharge that he has. So you'll see here he has this ability, Warblade. This is the one that I just buffed. Can consume up to 80 overcharge. It deals 141 damage and 0.7 damage for each overcharge used. So we're going to go ahead and just straight up knock this guy out. Except everybody's stunned. Great. Get some shields with the burst. And our attack has gone up. And then we're going to heal everybody. Now, let's talk about the performance of the game. It runs fine. It's not an incredibly taxing game, as you can see. Where is... Who's lowest? He is, actually. It runs fine. I haven't really had any issues with it. I did have one crash, but I think that was because there was a Windows update running in the background, and that usually messes with my system pretty hard for whatever reason. That guy just ran away. So yeah, no performance issues to speak of. There's the occasional hiccup when it's streaming something in, but that's to be expected. Other than that, the game runs just fine. So what's my final verdict on this game? Well, if you really, really like the JRPG style, you're not going to have any faults with this game except maybe little nitpicks that I've already detailed. If you don't really like the grinding, it may not be a game for you, but really, once you get a few hours into it, the difficulty ramps up and the grinding really just becomes battling intelligently. Now, and that's a strange thing to say once you get a few hours in, but you have to remember this is an RPG. They take a while to get going, so if you're watching this video, you probably already knew that. I do hope that this game gets a sequel. That's how much I like it. I can definitely recommend it. So, this has been a look at Battlechasers, guys. If you enjoyed the video, hey, hit like, maybe subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and if you really liked it, head on over to the Patreon. Every little bit helps me out. I've been Dimebot. I'll see you guys next time.